Don't let the rake inside. The wind howled through the dense forest, a chilling serenade that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to live near it. On the outskirts of a small village, nestled between ancient trees and tangled undergrowth, stood an old cabin. It had been abandoned for years, its wooden walls weathered and creaky. Legends whispered through the village spoke of a malevolent entity that roamed the woods at night, an entity known only as the Rake. Jonathan had recently moved to the village, seeking solace after a painful divorce. He was a city man, unfamiliar with rural life, but he was determined to start anew. The cabin, despite its dilapidated state, offered the peace and quiet he craved. The villagers warned him about the stories, but he dismissed them as mere superstition. Don't let the rake inside, they would say, their eyes wide with fear. Once it gets in, there's no escaping it. Jonathan chuckled at their superstitions. He had faced enough real-life horrors to be fazed by ghost stories. He spent his days repairing the cabin, filling the silence with the rhythmic sound of his hammer and the occasional chirping of birds. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonathan sat by the fireplace, reading a book. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows and whistling through the cracks in the walls. He pulled his blanket tighter around himself, enjoying the warmth of the fire. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the front porch. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He set his book down and listened intently. Another thud, followed by a scratching sound, like nails on wood. Cautiously, he approached the door and peeked through the peephole. Darkness stared back at him. Probably just an animal, he muttered to himself, though unease gnawed at him. He returned to his chair, trying to shake off the feeling. The scratching continued, growing more insistent. Jonathan's curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. The beam of light cut through the night, revealing nothing but the empty porch. He stepped outside, scanning the area. The forest loomed menacingly, its shadows twisting and shifting. As he turned to go back inside, he saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring at him from the edge of the woods. His breath caught in his throat. The eyes were large, unblinking, and filled with an unnatural hunger. Jonathan stumbled back, slamming the door shut. His hands shook as he locked it, his mind racing. The stories flooded back to him, the villagers' warnings echoing in his ears. Don't let the rake inside. He backed away from the door, heart pounding. The scratching resumed, louder and more frantic. He could hear the creature's guttural growls, a low, menacing sound that sent chills down his spine. Jonathan ran to the window and peered out. The eyes were closer now, moving towards the cabin with an eerie grace. Panic set in. He rushed to the back door, ensuring it was locked, then checked all the windows. The creature circled the cabin, its eyes never leaving him. He could hear its claws scraping against the wood, feel its malevolent presence pressing in on him. Hours passed, and the scratching ceased. Jonathan dared to hope that it had left. Exhausted, he slumped in his chair, fighting to stay awake. Just as sleep began to overtake him, a soft tapping at the window jolted him upright. He turned slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. There, at the window, was a face. Pale, elongated, with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted into a sinister grin. The rake. It tapped its long, bony fingers against the glass, its eyes locked onto his. Don't let it inside, Jonathan whispered to himself, terror gripping him. The rake's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp teeth. It pressed its face against the window, smearing it with dark, viscous fluid. Jonathan grabbed a poker from the fireplace, brandishing it like a weapon. The creature's laughter echoed through the cabin, a haunting sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Stay away, Jonathan shouted, his voice trembling. The rake's eyes never wavered. It tapped the window again, then slowly began to move towards the door. Jonathan's mind raced. He knew he couldn't let it inside, but how long could he hold out? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, deafening bang. The door shuddered as the rake threw itself against it, trying to force its way in. Jonathan braced himself, clutching the poker tightly. The door creaked under the strain, the wood splintering. He could hear the creature's ragged breaths, smell its putrid stench. In a desperate bid, Jonathan ran to the kitchen and grabbed a bag of salt. He had read somewhere that salt could ward off evil. He poured a thick line across the threshold, praying it would hold. The banging stopped. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. He waited, every muscle tense. Minutes felt like hours. Slowly, he crept back to the door and listened. Nothing. He glanced out the window. The rake was gone. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. A new sound reached his ears, a soft, insidious whispering. "Let me in, Jonathan." His blood turned to ice. The voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, but filled with malice. It seemed to come from within his own mind, urging him to open the door. He pressed his hands over his ears, trying to block it out. "Let me in, Jonathan. You can't keep me out forever." He stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, I won't," he muttered, his resolve wavering. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. The rake's eyes appeared at the window again, filled with a terrible hunger. Jonathan could feel his willpower slipping, the creature's influence seeping into his thoughts. "Don't let it inside," he repeated, like a mantra, but the rake's power was overwhelming. Jonathan felt his hand move towards the door, as if controlled by some unseen force. He fought against it, sweat pouring down his face. The whispers became deafening, a cacophony of voices urging him to surrender. Just as his hand touched the doorknob, a loud crash broke the spell. Jonathan snapped back to reality, heart racing. He looked around, disoriented. The whispers had stopped. The rake was gone. In its place stood a figure, bathed in moonlight. It was an old man, his face lined with age and wisdom. He held a lantern, its warm glow illuminating the room. Jonathan recognized him as one of the villagers who had warned him. "You must be strong," the old man said, his voice calm and steady. "The rake feeds on fear and doubt. Do not let it inside, no matter what it says." Jonathan nodded, his resolve returning. The old man handed him a small pouch of herbs. "Burn these. They will help keep the creature at bay." With that, the old man left, disappearing into the night. Jonathan followed his instructions, lighting the herbs and spreading their pungent smoke throughout the cabin. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of calm. As dawn approached, the forest fell silent. The rake did not return. Jonathan knew he had won this battle, but the war was far from over. He would have to remain vigilant, always on guard against the malevolent entity lurking in the shadows. The villagers welcomed him into their fold, teaching him the ways of the forest and the secrets to warding off the rake. Jonathan had found a new home, not just in the cabin, but in the community that embraced him. Yet every night, as he lay in bed, he could still hear the faint whispering at the edge of his mind, a chilling reminder of the horror that lurked just beyond the door. "Don't let the rake inside,"